Welcome to Arnie's Class Podcast. I'm Arnie Aniel. I'm an HR development consultant, an international public speaker, a workshop facilitator, a coach, and an educator. Life is a great opportunity, and we all learn life lessons every day. This podcast is all about those lessons. Lessons like gratitude, confidence, happiness, mindset, and a lot more. Learning without action is information. Learning with action is transformation. Join me, learn, and transform yourself into a better you. Life mates, welcome to the second part of being an entrepreneur. In the first part, we all learned that entrepreneurship is not just about business. Entrepreneurship is a mindset. It's a lifestyle. That every time you create something to solve problems or to deal with pain points of your customers, your clients, or the people around you, that's entrepreneurship. My special guest, John, shared his experiences as entrepreneur himself. In this second part, we're going to discuss about failures, fears, and a lot more about entrepreneurship. I'm sure you're going to learn more as he shares more of his wisdom, his experiences, and his tips about entrepreneurship or being an entrepreneur. Life mates, listen and learn more. Okay, John, some entrepreneurs, they don't become successful by doing it just once. Maybe some people, they have not just once or twice or three or four, five failures before they become successful. How will you encourage those people that just keep on going, never give up, don't quit?
My first intuitive answer is, hey, it's life, and we never make it out of here alive anyway. So that's my first answer. I say don't take it too seriously. That's something that I've developed. I really don't have any fear at all. Like, that's probably something that separates me from a lot of people.
That's interesting, John, because when we talk about fears, most people, I myself, I have fears. And you said you don't have fears. How, I don't know whether it's in your DNA. How did you develop that kind of attitude that I don't have fears?
To be honest, I think that my brother passed away in 2010. So I think that really shaped an entirely new mindset because A, it gave me a sense of urgency because life is precious and it can all end tomorrow. And B, it just taught me that, that it all could end tomorrow, right? So basically just live life on your terms and don't be so serious about everything and don't be so sensitive to all these fears. It's only life. You walk around the cemetery sometime, like I go to the cemetery to visit my brother or, other relatives or friends or people that have passed away. And you walk around and you just see a lot of graves, a lot of people that are, have gone and come and gone. Right. And I think in a lot of ways we see the world just from our perspective. We just see it like, it's so, it's just so overwhelming if you look at it like that. But you just got to step outside of yourself and just realize, what, it's only life. Just do your best, right? Just do your best, put in 100% and just be content with that. And what else can you do? Right. But this is also a conversation that we had with the Toastmasters, right? And we got into this a little bit about determinism and free will, right?
Yes.
Most entrepreneurs will say, yeah, free will, right? Like you can do it. You can change everything. You can change your mindset from fixed to growth. But I believe that we have some element of free will, but I really subscribe to the theory that, what is what is, right? And that's why I kind of just, even though I get all worked up and I actually, I shift into a growth mindset when it's time to get shit done. But at the end of the day, I really strongly believe that, it's like you're rowing a boat and it's like, no matter how hard you row, no matter how hard you work, you're still going to end up at the same destination.
That's right.
And that's why I have to check myself often because my nature is definitely to, slam a couple cups of coffee and just, get over caffeinated and just like really go. But every now and then it's time to sort of scale back. And, but I'm 38 years old now. And, it's taken me some life experiences to get to that point, some ups and downs. As you know, I've been through a pretty messy divorce, had the startup out there in Thailand, and that definitely hasn't started up. It's like you're twisting the keys in the ignition. And when I say it hasn't started up in terms of return on that investment, because as
Yeah.
you know, it was linked to sports tourism, which ultimately was significantly affected from COVID. So, there's a lot of ups and downs, and there's a lot of failures. And that's the thing, is like, if you look at it from a one dimensional perspective and you say, like, for example, I'm starting a pizzeria and the pizza shop failed or something like that. But you have to look at life from a multitude of dimensions. You may fail in one aspect, or you may temporarily fail in one aspect, but perhaps you're making significant gains in other aspects. You might be learning a lot,
Mm.
like, using my example, with everything that perhaps would be on paper as a failure, because financially I might be in the red from the venture in Thailand. However, I've pivoted and I've taken those experiences and now I've leveraged them towards other opportunities here within the same sphere or the same industry, right? So it's just about having that mindset. There is no failure, right? There's no such thing. And when
Only
you link
learning experiences, as they said, John.
well, yeah, absolutely. Learning experiences, but then again, it's like, it's just life. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, it is what it is, just take it for what it is, because it's precious and it could be gone tomorrow. So it's up to you to define that. You
But
have
were
to
you
define.
always like this, John? That
No, I
because you
wasn't.
said that you don't fear anything. So were you always like this even when you were young?
No, I mean, I think I took life a little too seriously then, and I think now, I think the more bad shit that does happen to you, the more you do start to relax and become a little bit more zen about certain things, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's very important, because we're all limited in terms of 24 hours that we have in the day. So I mean, what kind of lifestyle are you really living? Are you getting all worked up and you may have all the money in the world, but like, for example, when I had the very successful affiliate marketing, and I still do well with it, I don't do as well. But when we were really ramping up and we had a pretty big team based mostly in the Philippines and we were making a lot of money, there was still something inside of me that was like missing, in terms of appreciating it. As my friend Tony used to tell me, he said, make sure you stop and smell the roses, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's something that I'm really doing at this point in my life. I've been through a lot, especially, oh, I mean, I can't even tell you, like, every chapter, it's almost like that's my nature. I attract lessons. And, now I'm just really starting to appreciate those lessons and just appreciate the things that are around me, instead of just moving on to the next chapter all the time. Just embrace the loss, embrace the failure. It's like, for example, I tell this to people all the time. What I love about being here is we have 4 seasons, right? We have different things to do in each season too. So a lot of people here, they might bitch and complain about the winter because it's cold or there's a lot of snow or it's difficult to drive or the days are very short, so it's dark. What I do is I just embrace that period, right? Because then it helps you to really appreciate this period that we're in right now, which is the late spring, early summer, right? So the idea is that you embrace every season, no matter what. And yeah, it might be a difficult winter at some time, at some times in your life, but you put on a hoodie, you go outside, you build a snowman, right? Like, that's the
Yeah.
thing, is like, you just make the best out of
Out of the
it.
situation you are in.
Yeah, and that also helps you to really appreciate, because life is a season, or it's a climate with seasons, right? And you
Yes.
can't change. I mean, there's certain things I believe. The problem is, I think people feel that they're more in control than they really are. I really think that people fundamentally, they feel that. I think it's also the culture that we're in 2022. I think people feel much more entitled to feelings, to be honest. This might be a deeper conversation, but I feel like people are just much more entitled. They're supposed to feel a certain way. They're supposed to, get certain feedback. They're supposed to get it instantly too. So I think nowadays, as a human race, we're going to struggle as we continue to go down this path where everyone's instantly gratified on social media too. It's like they
Oh,
don't embrace the pain. They
yeah.
don't embrace the struggle. They don't embrace, I mean, that's sort of like the stoicism or the warrior's mindset, right? I mean, I don't read as much as I used to, but I mean, there was a period of time, like I said, when I was traveling and living more of like the lifestyle business, where I really took the time to consume as much content as I possibly could, to ultimately lead me to this point that I'm at now and where I continue to go. And that's just be much more philosophical in the way that I approach my life and my career. And, when pain and struggle, like for example, you used to watch me work out in the gym, right? You probably watch me and you're like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy, right? But
Yes.
the thing is like that discipline, that like, it's almost like you have to tap into something different, and like I used to go, here's another example, case in point. This really shaped my mindset as a kid too. What really actually saved my life in a lot of ways, because I was probably going down a bad path in terms of the people I was associating with. But when I got involved with martial arts when I was 15, we used to do what's called horse stance. And horse stance is where I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but you kind of get into like the bottom of a squat position and you have your legs, your upper thighs are
Up.
parallel. They're parallel to the floor. It's like the bottom
Oh,
of a
I thought
squat.
it's up. Oh, okay.
So you're I don't know, you could probably take a look, but basically it's like the bottom of a squat position. Maybe I can kind of show you. I don't have much room behind me, but you're at the bottom of a squat and then you're like this. You kind of put your hands at your hips and you have
Okay.
to keep your torso upright. So it's probably why I squat so well. You probably see me squat, but that shaped the base of that. But we did that and we had to hold it for a certain extended period of time. And the minimum was 3 minutes before every class. And this probably shaped the disciplinary mindset and the framework that I apply to my life today in every aspect. And that's that, like, shit sucks sometimes and you just have to deal with it. Like, it's not easy, but you don't quit and you just fight through it. And I actually still to this day, I hold the school record. I believe I'll have to confirm this with he's called Shufu. At the time he was called Sifu. Now it's Shufu, right? So that's like the rank in Kung Fu. So at the time I held the record. It was 6 minutes and 15 seconds flat,
Ooh,
right? And I
six
remember, like,
minutes and wow.
dude, if you try this, like, just try it for like 20 seconds. You're gonna be like, whoa. Like, just get to a bottom of a squat and you just hold that position, right? With your torso
Yeah.
upright, and you have to have your hands at your hips, right? And then you have to have your lower legs are perpendicular to the ground, obviously, and then it's like a 90-degree angle, and your upper legs are parallel to the floor. So it's like, a perfect 90
I have
degree
to
right.
try that one. I'll check that.
Yeah,
I'll check on that and I'll try.
you have to really go somewhere else up here, and you really have to just like detach yourself emotionally from the physical world, right? And I think this is, a deep philosophical conversation, linked to stoicism and just the teachings of Buddha, actually. And these are things that I have somewhat embraced about Thai culture. But as you know, I struggle in the business world and sports and politics world that I'm in. But what I love about being over there is that Zen mindset where it's kind of like you're born, you die, and I'm like, oh, all right, that makes things simple. Like,
As
all right,
simple as that.
let me calm down a little bit. Let me relax a little bit. And it does put things into perspective, right? As I said, you don't take things too seriously. So this is the long answer to your question about how do you deal with failures. I think the short answer is just embrace it, just learn from it, take notes. For myself, I write. I am an obsessive compulsive writer. As I said, like, if I have a thought or a feeling that I feel is valuable, because my brain goes like all the time, 24/7, right?
I
Even when
can
I'm sleeping.
imagine that, John.
Yeah. Sometimes when I get up in the middle of the night and like, okay, I got an idea or something, I have to like write it down, right? And then what happens is, because I have a business in Asia, and then I start checking my emails and I start looking at messages, and I'm like, shit, now I'm awake. It's 3 o'clock.
Even
And
in the
now
middle of the night.
yeah. And then I'm like, shit, now I got something to do. So then I get up and I go, and then I, figure out how to sleep later. But yeah, it's just something, a strategy that I've developed. I mean, if something's in your mind, you put it on paper, you write it out, it's essentially like what I call a brain dump, and you just brain dump it, and you just allow yourself to just let it out, and then you process it later. You process it later when you might be in a different state. Maybe it makes sense, and maybe you can apply it towards something, right? So that's the thing, is that, yeah, to your question about the failure, is just embrace it. Just appreciate it for what it is and learn from it. If you get some inspiration through that difficult stage, write it down. and yeah, just become better. I mean, just truly subscribe to that way of living, that you're essentially evolving to be a better version of yourself each and every day. So I think that comes down to your personal philosophy and your personal approach to life, right? And that's why
Yeah,
entrepreneurship isn't just about business. It's a lifestyle. Like
exactly.
that's
And
how we
that's why,
started this conversation, and that's how I'm tying it all together. I mean, entrepreneurship is absolutely not just about business or income or revenue. It's a lifestyle.
so John, if you can wrap it up in 3 steps. For example, someone is listening to us now. One of my life mates is, I have this idea because you said it's a creation. So I have
Mhm.
this idea now that I think it's a pain point for some group of people. So what's next after that? So I have this idea now. So what's next?
Okay, so you mean you have a business idea?
Yeah, I have the business idea. So what's next?
I would say just take a lot of time to research and absorb, and just have an insatiable appetite to learn as much as you possibly can about that topic. And here's a tip or a piece of information that I would definitely share to people. Like, for example, my wife Kwan is a teacher by trade, right? Like, that's the environment she grew up in, that's her background. And I noticed a lot, because as they say, if you can't do it, teach it, right? So I noticed a lot with the teacher's mindset, which ultimately manifests within the students, where there's a lot of theory, right? And I think I'm lucky in the sense that I did grow up relatively poor, where I didn't really have that safety net either. So it's like I was thrown in the water, and it was like, you fucking swim or you die,
Yeah,
right? Like,
that's right. You don't have a choice.
yeah, you don't really have a choice.
I
Like,
mean, you have a choice to swim or to die.
correct. And like, your survival instincts start to really kick in and turn on. And you just like suddenly become able to survive and solve problems and just figure shit out. Right. And I think a lot of people, if they live in such a comfortable environment, then it becomes theory to them. And a lot of people, if they are too comfortable, they're more interested and fascinated about the learning process. So that's why I wanted to make it a 2-step process. And the advice that I would give is that, yes, absorb as much information, seek out the mentors. Even nowadays, you don't have to actually find physical mentors. You just go on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
And, you just find people that are doing what you want to do, living the life you want to live. Learn from them. Don't buy their shit. That's one thing, that because nowadays everything's for sale, right? So don't
Yeah.
stay away from that. Don't spend your money until you have money to spend. So that's a thing. That's definitely a big piece of advice. A lot of people
Can
get
you say
sold
that
on,
again, John? So they
don't
don't
spend
spend.
money until you have money to spend, right?
Yes.
So
Okay.
you really have to be careful and conscientious of that, because nowadays everyone's being sold something, especially when you go online. Because let's say you want to learn about affiliate marketing, you just type in affiliate marketing. I mean, you're going to have to sift through about 95% of the videos being some sort of mastermind or webinar or seminar or something like that. So
Masterclass and all that.
right, exactly. So just be very, very strict about not spending a dime until you've earned a dime in that industry you want to enter. And this is really important, because once you start going down that path, guess what? You're either the seller or the buyer. You're either you got to think like an owner, right? Don't be what we call we say custody. What is a custody? A customer. Don't be a
Yeah.
custody, right? Don't always be a customer. It's one thing if you look at something where you're like, okay, I want to learn about this, but I haven't earned a dime in this. Well, why would you invest something that you haven't earned, right? Why don't you learn something on your own first? And that's the hard part, is most people, especially when they're being sold and marketed to, they feel, well, I don't know this yet, so I need to learn that. Well, guess what? Once you learn that, someone else is going to upsell you to the next thing you don't
Yeah.
know. And then you're going to need to learn that, and then you're going to need to learn that. So I went through a little bit of that too. I went through some marketing events and masterminds and things like that, and it was pretty cool. It was a good experience, but I'm also very aware and objective in how I manage that. So I scaled back, right? And I thought to myself, where's the ROI, right? Where am I actually getting some reasonable and measurable return on my investment, financial investment, right? And I think a lot of people, they end up going down that downward spiral, and then they just fizzle out, and then they make a lot of friends at these events, or maybe they have a lot of information, but they have absolutely no idea how to apply it. So what I was going to say is just read and research everything and anything you want to learn about a certain topic. Find the mentors that you can study, read their books, listen to their podcasts, listen to their YouTube videos, etc. And then take that a step further and really start to internalize that and start to build your own vision of yourself and what you want and what you expect, right? And that takes time. That's the hard work. That is the hard work that is not necessarily talked about because you can't really sell that.
Yeah.
How do you sell that, right? It's like, for example, everyone wants to be a personal trainer at a gym, but no one wants to say, okay, you got to just commit to the long term. It takes work. It's not easy to sell. It's, work is not sexy, like people don't, oh, I have to work. No, I mean, success is boring, man. Success is boring. It's the same shit over and over and over and over and over. It's just principles and habits and, just being inspired to be, the better version of yourself each and every day. And that takes a significant amount of investment into yourself, a significant amount of work. So carrying that forward again. So you definitely want to do your reading, your research, and, absorbing as much knowledge and experience from mentors and things like that. But then take the time to have the conversation with yourself, start to write out your goals. I like to recommend 3, 6, and 12-month goals. And if you really want to measure those,
3, 6, 12 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months.
Yeah, that's a good starting point. And if you really want to measure that, what I would recommend is using what's called SMART goals. I'm sure you've heard of that, right? It's the
specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound.
Thank you. So yeah, so they're right there on the tip of your tongue, right? So you take 3, 6, and 12 months as sort of the timeline. You use SMART goals to govern, and then you start to write out those goals so they are, smart, right? And in some ways, I also like to recommend this. I mean, we're talking more specifically about, okay, let's back up a bit to the point that I was going to make. So if you look at the 8 aspects of wellness, I don't know if I can recall those off the top of my head, but I'll try. Mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, environmental, social, occupational, and financial. Okay, I do know them.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Don't worry, I'm ready to help if you forget something.
You're like a walking encyclopedia, so you probably have all that stuff in your head. But yeah, so what I like to do is take those, right? Because you're not building, this is the thing, is you're not just building a business. You're not, so that means occupational and financial, right? You're building a life. You're building a fucking life, right? And that's the thing, is people don't, we're so segmented and parsed out and, compartmentalized in the way that we approach, like it's all related. How you do anything is how you do everything, right?
That's right.
If you're really good in the gym, you're probably going to, like, for example, like you see the way that I work in the gym, well, you probably have an idea of how I work in my career, right? I'm probably not going to the gym and then, sitting, drinking Mai Tais at the pool all day. I'm probably applying that same work ethic, that same principle, those same principles. And that's the thing, is I like to use the 3, 6, and 12-month timelines, SMART goals to sort of govern those timelines, right? And then apply those to the 8 aspects of wellness. So of course, as an entrepreneur, yeah, you want to start with the occupational, the financial, but if your physical health starts to, slack off and you start to get overweight, or, maybe you're getting so tired just going up 3 flights of stairs or something, that's going to have an impact, right? And let's say if you're not reading because we already touched on that, if you're not supplying the mental exercise for yourself, reading books and listening to podcasts, etc., you might not be sharp enough to capitalize on the next idea. Or emotionally, if you're having, and this is such a big one. If you have, because as you know, I went through a divorce, right? Emotional stuff is so draining. If you don't have the proper support from your friends and your family, somebody that's going to foster, people that are going to foster that growth and that progress and support you along your journey, that's actually so taxing, because it's so hard to measure that too. Emotional stress and emotional trauma and things like that. So the emotional aspect, physical, spiritual. I mean, for some people, like every now and then we'll go to church. You're Catholic, right? So like every now and then you go to church, you kind of just make peace with God. You talk to God. You have your own relationship with some higher power, right? So, I mean, the point is that you have to have a well-rounded approach, and of course, as an entrepreneur, you're going, it's like looking at a graph. You'll probably have certain spikes in the occupational and the financial departments because that's where you're focused, but you absolutely cannot neglect the other components, right? You have
That's right. They are all interconnected.
They're all interconnected, right? I mean, what good is having all the money in the bank if you have no friends or family, or
that's right,
or you're like 500 pounds and you're obese and you're going to die at age 40, right? Like, what's the point of having all these things if you're not living a well-rounded, balanced lifestyle. But of course, you're not going to be perfectly balanced, because that's a fantasy. And I think that too many people subscribe to that, and that's unrealistic and not practical. You're definitely going to be somewhat biased as an entrepreneur. I mean, you're going to be, of course, thinking about your business, your money. You're going to think about that stuff as your priority. It's like a pyramid, right? You have certain things that are at the top of the pyramid, and there's certain things that are at the base of the pyramid, right? It's never going to be symmetrical, and that's no one's symmetrical. We're all, biased to some degree. I mean, you meet a priest at a church. Well, I mean, spiritual life is probably going to be the most important thing in his life. Maybe financial is not so important, right? But an entrepreneur, financial is surely going to be higher in terms of the priorities, right? So everyone has a certain checklist that they go through in how they prioritize. And I think it's also important to note that we all go through seasons, right?
Yes.
So 4 or 5 years ago, when I was just like, it was just all money, all day, business, money, business, money, business, money. But then, I learned some lessons in terms of other priorities that perhaps may have been neglected, right? Now I'm, not so successful because of my situation, right? I'm taking a step back financially because, starting a business over there, taking some losses with the COVID situation, going through the divorce, right? So we go through these ups and downs and these peaks and valleys, but I'm also a lot more well-rounded in the sense that I can sort of slow down, breathe, relax a little bit, appreciate the things around me, appreciate little things like the leaves blowing outside on this beautiful day, stuff like that. Like there's little things that you gain through your experiences. Some call it wisdom, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to define it as. But that's my advice. That's a lot of advice, but just to unpack that and sort of put it simply, make sure you are reading and researching, and make sure you are coupling that with the writing, and spend time with yourself, being clear with why you're doing it. As they say, the 5 whys.
Yes.
Anytime you do anything, just ask why 5 times. And if you get past the 3rd or 4th why, you're starting to get somewhere, right? Because then you're starting to understand yourself, and then you can really understand the root of who you are. And if you're living in a certain mindset where you're just essentially reacting and you're just doing what other people do, and you're not really understanding why you do what you do, it's time to take some inventory on yourself. It's time to scale back and really ask yourself why you're doing something. And that's I would say the biggest advice. Really spend time with yourself, have those conversations with yourself. And obviously, you could talk to yourself in the mirror if you want, but for me, having a conversation with myself, it's about writing, right? And the more clear that you write, the more clear that you can communicate to not only yourself, but also to others too. And I think that's why writing is important, because clarity ultimately is power to drive your career, your life, and ultimately help you make those decisions. And without that clarity, you're just sort of floating. And coupled that with timelines, like we talked about with the SMART goals and the 3, 6, 12, and then you can stretch that out. Once you become a little bit more successful and established, you can do things like 2, 5, and 10. And you start to have like a 10-year plan for yourself. And that's hard, right? Because a lot of people are like, fuck, 10 years, that's a long time from now, especially if you just start. So the thing is, there's actually a really good speech from Matthew McConaughey from the Oscars. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but I like this, and I don't remember it verbatim, but it was something along the lines of, my mentor is myself in the future, so I always have someone to chase. And what he's basically doing is he's essentially manipulating time to connect with his future self. And I do this a lot too. Like, I'm 38 now, so what would my 40-year-old self be doing every day? What would he be thinking? What would he say if he wanted to consult me? What would the 50-year-old version, do, think, and act, and things like that? And that's really weird, right? A lot of people don't like to think that way, because we're almost like an external culture as humans now. Like, we're always looking for something outside of ourselves to essentially tell us what to do or guide us. And that's something that I found is important and valuable, of course, but again, it has to be, there's no perfect ratio, but just to generally speak, I would say 1 to 1, just whatever time you spend consuming content from others, or from reading, or from videos, you really have to match that with the time that you do spend with yourself, digesting that information and making sense of it, and learning how to apply it, and asking yourself why you want to apply it, when you want to apply it, how you want to apply it, with whom you want to apply it, right? So that's my advice. I think that's very valuable advice, very outside the box advice too. It's probably not something most people would give as advice, but hopefully it's helpful to your audience and the people that do follow.
Definitely helpful, John. And with all those tips, advices, suggestions, what do you consider the greatest lesson you've learned in your life, John?
Greatest lesson. Yeah, I would say the first intuitive response would be when my brother passed away. That, like I said, it's like
The
life
one you
could end
mentioned
tomorrow.
earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like life could end tomorrow for all of us. I could walk out of this office and trip and fall down the stairs and die. It sounds really fucked up and really morbid, but like that's the reality. You walk outside. I mean, we have a big backyard and there's like some wooded area, like some trees and things like that. And we see the cycle of life all the time. We
Yeah.
watched a bird just get killed by a squirrel, and you're just like, it's nature is cruel, right? And that's the thing, is like we are part of nature. We have to embrace that. Like as I said, I mean, you just gotta embrace the fact that what you do here in this lifetime is ultimately up to you how to define it. I believe that it's definitely pre-scripted, but you have the ability to define what that script says and how it speaks to you, and you can live life on your terms within those confines. And yeah, I just think that it could all be over in a heartbeat. So you may as well appreciate this gift that we do have, which is life. And times are tough, and sometimes things get stressful and things can be overwhelming and people get anxious. And some people, they choose to numb themselves, whether it's through like drugs, alcohol, etc. But I would
Mm.
say just embrace it, embrace the pain, embrace the struggle, because that's all part of life. Don't live life seeking the good times. Don't live life just looking for the good times and the times that make you feel good and all those happy moments. It's maybe it's very Buddhist of me to talk this way, right? Like to speak about yin and yang and things like that, but it absolutely is true. You should really understand and appreciate that everything is temporary. The good times are temporary, the bad times are temporary. So embrace
This,
them
yeah.
equally.
And
Embrace
you
them
should be
equally.
able to say that this thing shall pass too.
Right. I've heard, I think Prince EA, or however you say his name, he's pretty influential now in terms of like the motivational life coaching type stuff, that I see on social media. And that's definitely a quote that I think that it's probably not him that invented it or came up with it, but I mean, he's coined that phrase in popular culture these days. And, I've heard a lot of people echo that. And yeah,
Mm.
exactly. It's the same thing like seasons. I mean, no matter what, it's life is a roller coaster. It's gonna go up and down. Just enjoy the fucking ride. So
Yeah,
there you go.
you cannot be up there all the time. You cannot be down there all the time.
Exactly. And just embrace it for what it is. Seasons, roller coaster. This too shall pass. However you want to just define it in this English language, then it's ultimately up to you. But don't take it too seriously. It's all going to end someday for all of us. We don't know when. We all have an expiration date. So appreciate it for what it is. We don't make it out alive. None of us do. So just just live life to its fullest, and just appreciate the gift that we all have.
There you go. Very well said.
Sure.
John, we make decisions every day, or maybe we can even say every hour or every minute of the day we make decisions.
Yep.
What decision you've made in the past that has a huge impact of who you are now?
Uh, Going to Southeast Asia, just leaving, just disconnecting from everything. So not to go further down the path in terms of my brother's passing and the things that we were involved with and stuff like that, but as I said and alluded to earlier, it was not a very healthy lifestyle. There was a lot of not so good things going on, right? So like when he passed, it was like a wake up call for me that it was like I need to do something drastic, like not just like a little bit, but a lot of bit, right? Like do something
Mm.
completely life changing. And for me, as I said, my brother living in Philippines, it was sort of like my ticket to just go somewhere very, very far away, right? And just separate from the people I was associating with, the lifestyle I was living, the neighborhood I was living in, etc. And ended up in Philippines, and then did a little bit of traveling around there. And of course, making money helps, and having the freedom to develop your business while making money, and also having the time to appreciate the money that you're making to do the traveling and things like that. So I'm very fortunate and blessed to have that opportunity. But then showing up in Bangkok, Thailand, and not knowing anybody, and just myself and my ex-wife at the time, we just decided to say, hey, this is home. And she was going through some stuff in her life where she wanted to start a new life too, start a new, not a new life, but a new chapter. Right. And that's the thing is I carry everything from the past. I don't believe in like burning the past. A lot of people do. I don't. I think that it's all part of who we are. It's just a chapter. You may close a chapter and start a new chapter, but you absolutely don't start a new book. We all have one book and it's called life, right?
That's right.
So for me, I embrace all those chapters. And then when we started a new chapter together in Thailand, I think that's probably the one thing that I did do that changed my life. I mean, I just basically started a whole new life, a whole new chapter of my life in an entirely foreign country. Didn't know the language, didn't know the people, didn't know a single soul. I didn't know anyone there. And it was just like, I'm home. Right. And it was just so refreshing, to just start over, because it's just me and myself, the opportunity to just rebuild my personality and my spirit, my emotional health, things like that. Cause it was a very difficult time for all of us. We all in my family processed that passing in a very different way. And for better or worse, I do believe that we did grow up somewhat in what's considered a codependent family. So like, as I said before, I think I've told you before, my father is of Irish American background. My mother's of Italian American, Sicilian American specifically, but my father never really knew his family. So we really didn't really understand or know much about the Irish side. So we were all raised in a very strong Italian American family, very close knit, very, just always like there, right? Like, and it's intense, there's just a lot of expectations from family members. Like you're always like, you don't really have a lot of independence, you're always all up in each other's shit,
Yeah.
right? It's just
Always with
how
the
it is.
family.
Yeah, and you're always like, even when you're not with the family, you're always like, oh, what's he doing? What are they
Yeah.
doing? And I find it very similar in Philippines. So I think you
Oh,
can
yes.
understand, right? Big families, Catholic religion, right? So there's a lot of also guilt and shame and things like that do come with that type of upbringing. And, so that was like heavy, right? Especially as I said, with the passing of my brother. And so for me, I just needed to just like free myself from like everything, not in a bad way, but just go out on my own for a while, And then now that I'm back, I appreciate a lot of the great things about where I'm from, the family that I come from, the background that I come from too. So I think that was the defining moment for me. It was just, you cut the cord for a bit. You just have to go out there and just
Yeah.
go out on your own. I mean, some people call it a sabbatical. Some people call it a retreat. So, like in Thailand, they go to the temple, right? Something like that. For me, that's what it was. It was just like, just go somewhere far, and just
When did you
start
go?
over.
When was that, John?
We went. My ex and I went for a small trip in April 2011, and then we ended up going there on May 10th, 2011. So that was 11, a little over 11 years ago.
Yeah.
So we ended up there. We spent 2 years there straight together. And at that time, I was traveling a lot, just, absorbing as much experience as I can. As I said, the business afforded me to do so. I was in and out of in and out of a new country every 30 days because I was living there as a tourist, right? So I would, we'd go to Malaysia, go to Cambodia, go to Laos, go to Singapore. So we did a lot of traveling, of course, back and forth to Philippines, been to Cambodia a lot of times too, because I think I told you about the orphanage that I
Yeah.
was helping to sponsor. So I've been to Cambodia, I think 15 times or so. So been to a lot of places, had a lot of experiences. And that just absolutely changed my worldview, my perspective, my mindset, especially seeing people impoverished yet somehow happy and content with the life that they're living, right? So that was definitely life changing in that sense, where that put things into perspective. Because as I said, I grew up pretty poor in this culture, and you don't really appreciate what poor is until you
Yeah.
don't know what you're going to eat for the next meal. That's poor. I mean, we were poor, but we had food, we had a bed, we had shelter, we had at least the basic stuff, right? But when you're in a certain culture, in a certain country, you kind of don't know, especially back then. I mean, this is before social media and things
Yeah.
like that. Like, you don't really have any clue what's outside of your own little city or hometown, So yeah, back then, I mean, I did have a chip on my shoulder because I didn't, I mean, when you're really young, you don't really know what poor is. But as you got into your teenage years, you start to see like your friends driving nice cars or, wearing nice clothes and things like
Yeah.
that. And you're like,
That's the
oh yeah.
time you can really like, oh, I'm different.
Yeah. And then you're like, okay,
They're
we're
luckier
poor.
than me.
Right. You start to put that stuff into perspective.
Yeah.
So overall, yeah, just being out in Southeast Asia, experiencing a different lifestyle, meeting new people, being separated from the lifestyle I was living here. I would say that stuff really was the significant shift or the tipping point. But yeah, that would probably be it. I mean, there's many I can get into, but if we're gonna pick one, that's probably it.
Southeast Asia. Last question, John. If you're going to write, or someone else is going to write your life as a book, what will be the book like and what will be the title?
The title would be called House Money, and I'll tell you why. I already thought about it too. Obviously,
Oh,
that's
wow.
just
Okay.
okay. So it
House
goes.
money.
Okay, do you know what that means? Do you know what house money means? Okay, so what it
I'm not
means is,
sure.
yeah, it's okay. So obviously, I've done my fair share of gambling. So house money, what that means is that when you go into a casino, they give you money to spend. Basically, they comp you money, right? So they basically give you money to sit down at a table or a slot
Mm,
machine or
yeah.
whatever and start gambling on their dime. You're not paying for it, right? So that's the way I look at life. I call it house money, right? And it's the same philosophical approach that I had explained earlier too. And that's that, this is all a gift. This is all house money anyways, right? Like I think about the shit that I went through and the shit that I've been through and the shit that I've done when I was younger. And I'm like, how the hell am I still here? How am I still playing at this casino, right? Because that's really what life is. It's almost like you're dealt a certain hand and it's up to you what you make of it, right? And to me, taking it a step further and looking at it a little deeper, it's like this is all house money for all of us. This is all bonus. Like we are the lucky ones, the lucky sperm that made it. Really, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the way you look at it. We are one of millions that made it. So to me, this is all house money. What I mean is it's just free money, right? This is like we get a chance to sit down at the casino of life and just play how we want and just gamble how we want, just, define it how we want. So it's just, to me, it's house money. That's what I would call my book. And I've thought about it too. I mean, someday I'll write a book when things do slow down and settle down. I mean, I'm still 38, so I have some time to develop the plan for that. But that's what I was thinking. And I'm sure I'll write a few books too. I'm sure I'll have a lot of stuff to, pay forward and give back to other aspiring entrepreneurs, but also people that come from similar backgrounds like myself, where perhaps they may not think there's something bigger and better out there for them. But if you do shift your mindset a little bit and you do take that approach that I was suggesting earlier and just don't take it too seriously, just get out there and just live life, and just let things go and don't be so strict and so hard and and otherwise what's the point? You're just going to be a slave to yourself. And just sometimes you just got to flow and just let things go. And I think that definitely is something I picked up from living in Southeast Asia, because that's much more of a relaxed lifestyle. But don't
That's
get me
right.
wrong, I'm
Yeah,
still
I know.
I'm very hard nosed and very structured and rigid when it comes to getting shit done and making sure that progress is made, because you absolutely have to have that yin and yang approach. And that's the blessing that I have. That's the fortunate experience that I've had, where I can see the value in both sides, right? It's very east meets west type of personality,
Mm,
definitely taking the best of both worlds. And that's ultimately what the American immigrant story is too, right? Because the immigrants came here, they brought all the great things from their old world culture, but they
yeah.
left all the bad. And then they assimilate into the American system, which ultimately, in my opinion, it's not really a nation. It's the United States of America, right? So it's a melting pot, as they say. It's a blend. So it's a bunch of subcultures within a culture, right? So it's almost like every house is its own nation, its own country, right? Like there's an Indian family here, there's Jewish family here, there's another white American, Irish and Italian family next door. There's me. I have the Irish and Italian background. My wife is Thai, right? So we all have our own cultural upbringing, our own values, our own principles, but it works within a capitalist society, which, I firmly believe is I wouldn't call it the best because I only know Philippines, Thailand, and
The
America. I
US.
won't. Yeah, I won't be like a lot of Americans say. It's the best place in the world. Well, how do you know? You don't know, right? But I will say of the three, I do believe that it because it's about freedom of thinking, expression. And I think here in America, there's definitely um, a higher standard placed on that, or at least a higher priority, because you're not really stuck in the box. You're supposed to be free thinking. You're supposed to appreciate the difference in our culture.
Mm.
And I know culturally we're going through a really difficult time, but I firmly believe in the American ideals, on what it was founded on and upon, by our founding fathers, and what it really stands for. It's an idea. America is an idea. It's not a country. It's an idea. And that's the thing, is it's ongoing. Ideas don't die. I mean, that's the thing. That's why America will never go away, because it's not even a country. It's an idea. And it'll morph and it'll shape. It's just like a business, right? It's just like any organization. It's not like just one person or one culture. It's just an idea with a bunch of cultures within it. So I kind of forgot where I was going with that point, but
House money. We're still with the house money, the book.
money, right?
So you're going to write your book one day.
Sure, yeah, someday. That would be the name. I think that's an ideal name, because it doesn't imply that we're all sitting down at this casino. We're all sitting down inside this casino of life, and if you play with house money, you don't have the fear of losing anything, right? And I think if you're living life fearful that you're going to lose something, it's a tough way to live, because fear ultimately is, like, I think that's the biggest cancer that we all have to avoid, right? And you have to somehow come to terms that we're all going to die someday. So whatever happens in this lifetime, how bad could it really get, right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't mean anything. We're all going to die. So that's just the way I look at it. Of course, that's a little bit more Zen and a little bit more Eastern in terms of its philosophy. But yeah, like I was saying earlier, why I brought America into the conversation, it's the blend, right? It's the blend of the East and the West. So, I mean, if you can take the best from this culture and also the best from the cultures over there, then, it becomes an ideal way to approach life. And at least that's what's worked for me.
Whew, wow. Good
Woo.
luck on that. And I know for sure that you're going to write that book someday, John.
Yeah.
And I'll be one of those readers who's going to get that book on Amazon. But I want a copy that is signed personally.
Of course, man. And, you'll probably learn a lot, when I start talking about the ages, between the ages of, say, 18 and 24, a lot of things that might be a little graphic for this podcast.
I can imagine, John.
Yeah. So, I mean, just a lot of things that happened during that period that definitely shaped the stage that I'm in right now, a sense of appreciation for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Because as I said, things could just all be gone for all of us in a heartbeat. I can leave this office and trip and fall and sayonara. And that's
Yeah.
it, right?
We'll never know. We'll never know.
You never know. So you better really appreciate life and live it to its fullest, because it truly is a gift. And if it's gone, it's gone. And that's that.
Yes. With that, thank you so much, John. And I believe my life mates, they're going to learn a lot from this episode, whether it's about creating the sense of urgency or don't take life seriously. Everything, I'm sure what you've shared, something for the life mates to learn, and they can apply to their own life. So thank you so much, John, for your time and your wisdom. Life mates, being an entrepreneur, just like what John said, it's like about creation. And I believe John was able to connect that to life in general. So wherever you are in your life at the moment, it's in your hand and you have the power to create something. And life is a gift. Enjoy. Unwrap it with joy, peace, and love. Thank you so much again. And once again, listen and learn.